Hello everyone, happy you could be here. Let's dive in. Sit at My Grave, Season 3, Ego's Death, Chapter 35. Dinner had gone well. It was a hearty stew that had been cooking in the oven for hours. The smell of it was amazing. Rich carrots, flavorful onions, and perfectly tender meat. The side dish was rye bread, along with some berry jam Arden wasn't familiar with. His dwindling funds, accompanied with traveling and the work he'd done outside, caught up to him, and though he was apprehensive at first, he quickly settled, feeding his aching stomach without much of a fuss. Having a warm, home-cooked meal was something he missed more than he thought he would. The food aside, the Neelys were perfectly fine to get along with. They weren't as loud and sickening sweet as the McKinneys, and they definitely weren't like his family, but it was alright. It beat being alone with his own thoughts for a while, or around any noisy or rude people. Chrissy, as promised, tried to pick his brain at the table, asking where he was from and the like, but she had to spend most of the time answering to her parents about her trip out. They were either really interested in her or strangely overprotective. Arden observed a bit, but mainly tried to stay out of it. He didn't need to get involved in anything more than what he had already. Farmhands have a curfew. I'm sure they told you that. Arden's body tensed roughly, hearing the voice behind him. He quickly turned around, getting defensive. Just before his body relaxed, seeing Chrissy standing against the doorframe of his room, a smirk on her face. His eyes quickly snapped focus to a shadow on the wall behind Chrissy. It took a drastic shape and looked nothing like hers. Arden gasped, falling back on his bed from the shock. He had to shake out of it, only to see the shadow was gone, and Chrissy was looking concerned, tilting her head. Jumpy. Never had a girl in your room before? Chrissy joked as she approached. I thought I was alone, Arden responded. He didn't want to appear as crazy as he was starting to feel. He leaned back up, confusion on his face as he caught her staring at him again. Oh, well, I didn't mean to scare you. I just thought I'd come and say goodnight, she responded, shifting her weight, jutting a hip out as she crossed her arms. Good night, Arden said. It was a little strange. He hadn't had the luxury of exchanging small pleasantries like that in a long time. The most he heard things like that was from his mother, and that was way before all this happened. Chrissy smiled a little, coming closer. I know it must be really hard traveling alone, but I do hope you like it here, she told him. She moved to punch his arm, but missed and swung her fist loosely in the air. Arden glanced at her hand, then back up at her from where he was sitting, arching an eyebrow at her. Just testing the air there. But, I think I've embarrassed myself enough for one evening. Good night again. Chrissy awkwardly laughed before turning swiftly and walking out, closing the door behind her. Arden watched the door for a moment. Chrissy was odd, but she was the least of his concerns. He slowly got into bed, comfy blankets covering his cold, achy body. It was soothing, and he begged himself to sleep decently tonight and get out of his own head. Traveling, learning, hoping to meet people he could relate to. He wanted to live life like this almost all throughout high school. Being here now for these reasons just made him wish he could go back. He thought about what he would have said and done in those same situations. He didn't have all the right answers yet, but that didn't stop him from repeating it in his head constantly, regretting how he treated people close to him. Arden fell asleep that night, clutching the key dangling from his necklace. Eyes on the prize. He could fix this. He just couldn't give up. The next day had been somewhat of a blur. He woke up surprisingly early, light barely peeking through the dark curtains. He moved to sit up, but his body flinched. He was sore. All that bending, stretching, and lifting made itself known. Eventually, he got himself up, rubbing his hands on his face, trying to fully wake up. It was odd. Being here had relaxed him enough for a full night's rest, but the feeling in his chest was still noticeable. He was still conflicted within himself. If he moved away, the rest of the looming baggage, there was that same nagging he felt on the plane with Emil. He had the sense that he was meant to be here, but the overwhelming feeling of not wanting to be at the same time made it hard to do everything. Is what I've been seeing real? A figment? A warning? Or... Arden thought to himself. He drug his journal out, writing his thoughts about it, documenting everything that had become increasingly important to him, just in case. Or is it my own cowardice? Is it me desperate to hide myself back in that bubble? He pondered bitterly. Reed's words to him were clearer to understand as he experienced more. He hated diving into those parts of his past, but he was finding that it didn't matter as much as it used to. A lot of what he did was for protecting himself, but fixing things were more important to him now. He made himself think back to ugly moments, and even contemplated looking at those old texts thoroughly this time. After Arden finished journaling a bit, he checked his phone for messages. Gallon still hadn't responded to his apology. Arden bit the inside of his cheek. He was hoping Gallon blocked him out of a quick anger, and hadn't read what he said, because if he did and still hadn't responded, it just made things worse. Arden put his hand on his chest. He felt himself trying to get angry, but it fought with the sadness that dully built up. I won't be doing this every morning. Remember, we can be friendly, but this is a job. You've made a commitment, and honoring what you've agreed on shows us who you are. Axili's voice spoke out after he knocked on the door. He didn't open it, allowing Arden his privacy, but he was stern with what he said. He was irritated with that wake-up call, but it did bring him back to the present. Arden muttered to him, mostly to keep him from knocking on the door again, but he did get up and get ready for the day. He put on a light sweater and some pants they provided him, long work shoes Axili gave him. He wore 2 pairs of socks with it, not trusting those boots to be new. Arden gave himself the once-over in the mirror. He was ready for a new day of work. With a sigh, he left out, shutting the lights off behind him. Today we'll be getting the weeds and rocks removed from the far side of the garden. That's where we'll start our new winter crop. Axili gave out instructions. He stood beside Arden in the backyard again. They'd had breakfast already, and were in work clothes now. It was still early, and the chilly air was nipping at them. On a day like today, Arden would prefer being inside with his books, but that's when everything was normal. Shockingly, with the way things had gone, even this was feeling more natural than what he knew he had to get back to. It'll be long and tiring work, but it'll be worth it to see those little plants grow, Axili said with a small smile. He walked out to the fields, leading Arden to the shed for tools. We'll get those other crops boxed up too. We want them ready for shipping, he explained. If this isn't your main source of income, what does your family do? Arden questioned, leaning against the wall inside the shed, watching Axili dig out tools. Well, we eat these crops, we sell them, and my wife sells baked goods. While I wouldn't call us rich, Axili began explaining. He handed Arden a rock rake, along with gloves. Arden arched his eyebrow at him, but took it. Our family is in good standing. Our house is fully paid for. I simply inherited this property from my father, and he from his, so that helps greatly. We almost did it. Well, Axili continued, but he quieted down, muttering something to himself Arden couldn't quite understand. Didn't what? Arden questioned, inching forward. We'll never get done sitting around. Let's take these tools out and get started boxing, Axili argued. He moved past Arden, going outside. Arden paused for a moment, frowning. He was curious, of course. This could very well have been something to do with what he was here for, but he didn't know how to keep the conversation going to make him admit to more. He'd never been good at it. He just hoped when Edvin got there, he could speak more to him and gain something from the stop. He walked out with Axili, getting to work with dragging out big wooden crates, carefully taking their horrors from the wheelbarrows, loading them up. The work wasn't grueling at first, but the repetition quickly became taxing, and helping Axili lift those boxes to the areas where the trucks would come to get them was something Arden was beginning to bitterly detest. There was no way he could do it alone. The crates themselves must have added 10 extra pounds to the amount of produce in there. Besides what he and Axili picked together, there were also a few other crates already loaded from before Arden had even got there, and he was forced to help move those too. Mind if I help? Chrissy asked, dropping out, dusting a bit of flour out of her hair. I don't like you doing such heavy work, dear, Axili warned with a frown. Arden just huffed. It no longer felt brisk out there to him. I'll just hold a corner. It's less work on everyone if we all help, she argued with her dad, before flashing a smile to Arden. Besides, I don't want you broken before I get to show you around town, Chrissy proposed, grinning. I'm not gonna break from carrying boxes, Arden replied, rolling his eyes. Good, so you agree to go with me, Chrissy confirmed slyly, before going over to attempt lifting one of the crates. Chrissy, please! Axili suddenly shouted, startling them both. If you have to help, we'll do it all together, Axili relented, coming over to help. Just be careful, and Arden, remember to lift with your legs. We don't want anyone getting hurt over this work, Axili warned with concern. Arden just nodded. He hadn't agreed to go anywhere with Chrissy, and he was annoyed with her inserting herself. He was thankful for the time to catch his breath. Alright, lift on 1, 2, 3.